Greetings viewers, if you click the video link, you're here to learn how to take apart the Sig MPX. This is the same one I just did a review on last week, so if you missed that video, you can go back and check that one out. So we're going to do what I normally do with my videos. We're going to do a basic breakdown just for maintenance and cleaning, and then we'll take it a step further for some of the other parts in case there's something specific you were wanting to do with this weapon. So you can always check the timestamps down below for that. So right off the bat, first thing we do before we clean and disassemble any weapon is to safety check it. So we have no magazine inserted. I am visually and physically inspecting the mag well. I'm going to lock the bolt to the rear, and I'm going to check my chamber. So there is no live ammunition anywhere in the room with me right now, so there's no chance of anything magically falling into the gun and going off. So we're going to start out by releasing the bolt. So if you are familiar with disassembling an AR at all, this is going to be very similar, so you shouldn't have any issues following along. We do have two takedown pins that are right here. They push from left to right. They are captured pins. But what I like to do first is I like to do the front pin. So we're going to give it a little push till it starts to pop out on this side. We'll go ahead and grab underneath that little head there that's on it and pop it all the way out. The reason why I like to do the front pin by itself first is because I like to take the handguard off and have more access to clean the muzzle device and the barrel, depending on, again, what muzzle device you have on your weapon or what handguard you have on there. It may be protruding a little bit further, and it's a lot easier to clean with the handguard off. So now with that off, I can just hold the pistol in a normal shooting grip, get some nice firm pressure on the forward portion of this handguard, and we're just going to separate. I'm going to pull backwards on the weapon with my right hand, and I'm going to push forward with my left. And this will slide out. You can see there are actually little kind of tracks that this rail slides into, so it's going to slide all the way off the front of the weapon. And then we can set that aside. Now we can push out the pin on the rear. This one's going to be a little bit tighter because it's kind of binding up back here with the little recoil buffer and the springs from the brake, from the bolt. So you can go ahead and grab on the front here if you need to and push on that pin until you can get access to it on this side. And then now the upper and lower should come separate. So you can see this little rubber buffer here. This is what the bolt is kind of slamming into. Since there is no buffer tube here, this is just helping to kind of cushion some of that blow. So you'll be able to have access here now to clean down all in your trigger components and your lower receiver. Next we're going to do is we're going to take the upper, we're going to go ahead and grab our charging handle, and we're just going to pull it straight to the rear. This is your bolt assembly with the recoil springs on the top there. And then your charging handle. This is an aftermarket charging handle, but it's essentially the same thing. So now we have access to clean our upper. One of the downfalls of this weapon when it comes to cleaning is it is kind of a pain in the butt to get down in there because it is very tight quarters. It also has this very funky shape, you can see, to make room for those recoil springs and the bolt. So just do the best you can getting down in there and cleaning all that junk out. So we'll set the upper aside as well. On the right hand side, you'll see there's this circular cutout. There's also a pin that's protruding through there. You can push from that side, or if you're able to grab the other end of it here. This is your firing pin, retaining pin, so make sure you set that aside somewhere you're not going to lose it. We're going to tilt this backwards like this. We should have our firing pin, and there should be a kind of spring that comes out with it. So we've got our firing pin, and then this spring sits on here like that. So you can leave that on there for now just to keep track of it. All right, so this cam pin, you'll notice it gets kind of trapped underneath these recoil springs. Now, keep in mind, if you have a Generation 1 or Generation 2 MPX, you will be able to remove this portion here. If you have a Generation 3, from what I am to understand, it is now locked in place with a roll pin, so you cannot disassemble it. I do not recommend doing that. It's like that for a reason. They don't want people messing with it. Probably because people have lost too many parts screwing around with it, or maybe some eyeballs. But what I like to do is I like to set the bolt face down on the table. It's sitting flat by itself. You can grab the springs as high as you can and pull them down, and then just try and get a hold of them with both hands. And then this should pop off the top. And then you can release both of these springs. So then now if we just grab the body of the bolt here and lift up, those two rods will come out on their own. We've got access to clean all these parts here. So with that out of the way, now we are able to remove our cam pin. So we'll push this to the rear. There is a dot marking on the bolt here, and then there's one on the cam pin itself. We need to rotate this 90 degrees, whether it's to the front or rear, doesn't matter. And then we're just going to pull that straight out. And then your bolt should remove out of the front. So this is the bolt itself. It's kind of a little star shape there. We have the extractor here that we can remove as well to clean it. So you'll notice that on the left-hand side there, it is a lot smaller than it is on the right-hand side. So we need to push from the left to the right. So I just use my firing pin, retaining pin to kind of get it started. You can grab a hold of it from the other side. And it is, again, it is tapered and it has a little head on it, so it does only go in one direction. So we set that aside, and then the extractor comes out, and it should have a little spring and kind of rubber piece in the middle attached to it, so make sure that is there. It doesn't get left in here, doesn't fall on the floor and get lost. You are going to need that to create the back pressure there, so you can help rip the empty brass out of your weapon. So that's your bolt there. All right, you can leave this as is. There's no need to take this apart any further. You can access everything on here that you need to go ahead and get this clean. All right, so that is as far as I would recommend taking your weapon apart for regular basic cleaning and maintenance after you come back from the range. Just hit all those parts that indicated there that you have access to. Just get everything nice and cleaned up. Once I've done that myself, we'll go ahead and do it in reverse order and we'll put this weapon back together. However, I want to hit some of the other points in the event that you were trying to do something more advanced. So the MPX itself utilizes standard AR triggers. This is a aftermarket hyperfire trigger, which is not the same as a standard AR. I also have anti-roll pins on here. So the process for doing that is going to be much different in here. There are thousands upon thousands of videos out there that will show you how to remove and install specific AR triggers. So if you find one of those videos out there that would be able to help you with that step, it's going to be, again, exactly the same as here as it would be on an AR-15. So one of the great things about the Sig MPX and MCX weapons is how easy it is to remove the barrel, whether you are doing a caliber change, a barrel length change, or just a routine annual or biannual maintenance on your weapon, and you want to get a nice deep clean on it. It is extremely easy. All we have to do is remove these two bolts that are right here. They are T25 Torx screws. So just a standard Torx 25, you'll see it indicated as TX25. It's just a star bit. It fits right in there, and we can get these two screws removed, and then we'll be able to take out our barrel. So once you have completely loosened the screws to the point where they spin freely, you'll notice on the other side that there are these little captured nuts here. They are flat on one end. And what'll happen is you'll get the screws to a certain point and you'll keep turning and turning and nothing's happening. So if these have popped out of their little pocket, that's the problem you're gonna run into. So what I would do is just put back pressure on those and then finish turning these screws out. All right, so once you've turned those till they can't turn anymore, you can let these two nuts fall down. Make sure you keep those together. And then that's all it takes. Now all we have to do is just grab the receiver, grab the barrel, pull straight out, and we've removed our barrel and gas piston assembly. So we're going to go ahead and set this upper receiver portion aside and take a look at this. So this is where you're going to get the majority of your gunk and grime. So I definitely would recommend doing this depending on how often you are shooting. At some point in your ownership of this weapon system, especially after a couple thousand rounds, or perhaps every year, again, do a deep cleaning on your weapon, because this is where the magic happens in terms of directing those gases to feed the next round. So let's go ahead and take this gas piston apart. All right, so the easiest way that I have found to remove this gas piston, I have a 9/16 inch wrench here. If you were to look at the front of the piston assembly here, you can see that it has just the right shape and size for a wrench. So we have these two pieces sticking out on the side here, these little two wings. What we need to do is we need to rotate this entire thing 180 degrees. So I'm just going to put my wrench on here. It lines up perfectly, and I'm just going to turn it. Just being careful not to scratch it up too bad. And once we get it turned over 180 degrees, you'll be able to see that there is no little wing thing sticking out here, and we are free to pull this piston straight towards the front. If you are having some difficulty getting it, what you can do is, this is the actual piston portion here. You can just kind of give it a little bit of a couple taps there. The front assembly will pop out. It's got your gas rings on it. You can see this half moon shape here. So again, that's that 180 degrees that we're flipping it out. And then your piston. So again, depending on how much you've shot and the last time you've taken this thing apart, it is going to be a little tough to get that out of there. So again, it may just need a little bit of motivation. Just give it a little push from the front, And there's your gas piston. So again, this thing is going to be filthy, so you're going to want to make sure to clean that really well. If this thing gets gummed up, the operation on your weapon is going to slow down quite a bit, and you're going to have some issues. So that's going to be it for this. So you have access again completely to clean your muzzle device from any direction you please, bore snake your barrel, clean your chamber, clean out your the internal area for your piston there, because this is again the workhorse for the gun. So we want to make sure this portion stays in tip-top shape. All right, so now that we have everything nice and cleaned up, it is time to reassemble everything. We are just going to do it in reverse order. I would like to address one thing though. In the prior sequence when we were disassembling the piston, you saw me kind of tap on the end of the piston with the wrench a little bit. Keep in mind, I tapped on it. I did not hammer it. I was not smashing it out of there. The end of this piece here is domed. We want that dome shape to be there. That is what's going to interface with the front of your bolt. And it actually goes in here. If you start wearing this down by beating the heck out of it and flattening it and smashing it the way it's not supposed to be looking, it's going to interface here a lot worse, and you're not going to, and you're going to start experiencing some issues. So just keep that in mind. Again, I just tapped it out. I did not go to town hammering it. You can use something like a brass hammer, a rubber hammer, or something that's not going to damage or smash this up too bad. And again, just give it gentle taps to get it to come out. All right, so now all we're going to do to get this back together is we are going to take our piston assembly with that little dimpled portion that's going to go in, so the opposite direction of the muzzle. We're going to drop it down in there. You should just see this flat portion, maybe a little tight, but you can give it a little push to kind of get it to go down in there, and then you should see it protrude back from the rear here. So next we're going to take this piece that had that half moon shape on it and the 9/16 wrench slot on the front, and we're going to make sure that this ridged portion goes on the top, kind of like a rainbow. It's going over everything. We're going to push it right into that slot, and it should turn kind of loosely, but it's going to have a little bit of back pressure there. So we're going to go ahead and take our wrench again. We're just going to set it on here, gently give it a turn, and just keep spinning it until it goes around that 180 degrees. It should pop into place, and then again, by looking at it, you should see these two little kind of wings just barely starting to protrude up. So our piston is now locked back in place and is reassembled, and we are ready to put the barrel back in our upper receiver. All right, so we've got our upper receiver, we've got our barrel, we have our two screws and little captured nuts that hold them from the opposite side. This is the original user's manual that came with it. You can even see the Gen 1 handguard on there. So following the instructions from Sig, we're using our T25 Torx, and we are going to put these screws back in at 40 inch-pounds. Just so you can see that's coming directly from them. That's what they have to say about it. So as with everything before, we are just going in reverse order. You should notice this little dimpled piece right here in the bottom center of the barrel. That is going to index with a notch that is right here in the front of the receiver. Make sure the gas piston goes up towards your Picatinny rail at the top. I'm just going to kind of wiggle and guide it back in there. You'll know that you have it lined up when you can look down these screw holes and see all the way through perfectly. So we've got some blue Loctite on our screws. We're going to go ahead and insert these. Make sure they both go in all the way. I kind of put my fingers on them and flip this over, and what I'll do is I will put these screws on, and I will just kind of start spinning them by hand a little bit just to get them started. And then once they're kind of to a point where you can't hand tighten them anymore, I will put my finger back pressure on that little nut that has the flat side on it, and I'll kind of turn the screw a little bit until it pops into place on the other side, so I know that it's not going to spin. And I'm going to go ahead and start tightening these down. All right, so I'm not going to tighten them all the way. Once they get snug and they are flush and the nuts are locked into place, so they're not going to pop out, I can set my Torx driver aside, and I now have my inch-pound torque wrench, which is set to 40 inch-pounds. Again, as the manual states, I've got my T25 bit in here, and then I'm just going to tighten these down until it clicks. And there we go. Our barrel is now reinstalled in the upper. Just keep in mind, if you do remove your barrel and reinstall it or reinstall another barrel, it is highly recommended that you check your zero, because obviously little minute movements that may be occurring over here with these two screws in the barrel and how they line up can affect your accuracy downrange. So just reconfirm zero every time you remove and or replace your barrel. All right, so now it's time to reassemble our bolt. We have all of our pieces. We have not lost anything, thankfully. So hopefully you kept all your things in a secure location. Didn't have any cats or kids running around messing stuff up. So the first thing we're going to need is our extractor, our pin, and the bolt itself, and we're going to reassemble this. So we're just going to take our extractor, we are going to place it right back into position. It's kind of hard to screw that one up. Remember, this pin is tapered and it only goes in one way, so we want to go in from the side where the larger hole is. You can push down on the extractor, make sure that that pin pushes all the way in until it will not go in any farther. Now that's back where we want it to be. All right, so now we need to put the bolt back inside of the bolt carrier assembly. You need to pay attention. This thing is a right-handed weapon, so our extractor needs to be pulling from the right side. That's the way it's ejecting the rounds out of the weapon. So as it sits this way, this is pointing towards the front of the weapon. So it needs to look just like that. So again, as you're shooting it, this is the right-hand side. This is where your extractor should be. You are going to need to rotate the bolt inside there until that hole lines up in here and we can see. Then we need to take this cam pin, and again, you notice it has this dimple on the top of one end, so that needs to correspond with the dimple that is on the bolt carrier here. And all we're going to do is we are going to drop it down in that hole and we are going to spin it so that that dimple lines up. So the next thing we're going to do is we're going to take our firing pin and the spring, make sure that the firing pin goes through the spring like that, and then we are going to go in from the rear of the weapon. Push your bolt all the way to the rear, your firing pin should go forward. We are then going to need to take our firing pin retaining spring. The little legs on it kind of splay out a little bit, but once you get it in there and you kind of start pushing, you may have to rotate it a little bit and it should wiggle its way in. Make sure you kind of push the firing pin a little bit forward and then slide that pin in behind it, because the whole point of that pin is to keep the firing pin from falling out of the back. So we want to make sure that, again, that firing pin is pressed all the way forward. So now this whole assembly should move freely. There shouldn't be any obstructions. And the firing pin should not be falling out of the back. So this next part may be probably the hardest for some people. It requires a little bit of manual dexterity. If you have a second set of hands, that's probably optimal to assist you in getting this done. So these guide rods here have two ends. One has just kind of a head on it, and the other one has this notch that's in there. So the one that's got the head on it, the easiest way to do this is to take that and put the head down on both of these. And then we're just going to take the bolt and slide it over both of those just like that. And it should, again, stand up freely on its own. Springs have to go over the rods here, just like this. And we are going to need to push both of these springs down. Now, again, this is where, if you have a second set of hands, that's probably optimal. You may have to ask your significant other or your kid to step away from whatever they're doing for 5 seconds so you can get it done. Or if you're like me and you just refuse to ask for help and do everything yourself, you can do it just fine. Just kind of work the springs down, get them pinched in your grip in one hand, and then this is going to slide over the top of one. You can let go of that spring once that is done, pop the other one on, let go of that spring, and then you should have these pins and springs locked in here just fine. I would definitely not recommend doing this while looking straight down over it. In the event you let go, you don't want one of these springs shooting up and hitting you in the eyeball. So I like to do it away from my person, or if you have a box or something, you can do it inside of and have a lid on it, so if it does shoot up, it just hits the box. It doesn't go flying and you're crawling all around your workspace looking for missing parts. So that is our bolt carrier assembly put back together. All right, so next thing we need to do, we're gonna go ahead and put our charging handle in first. So the charging handle has these two notches on it. There are corresponding cutouts in the top of the receiver here for that. So we're gonna put so you can't just feed the charging handle in from the rear. You have to kind of go about halfway, put it in, and then push towards the top. It'll drop down in between those notches, and then you should be able to slide freely. We're going to leave this half hanging out. We're going to take our bolt, make sure that the bolt is pulled all the way forward. You're going to come up against the bolt here, line up everything in these notches that they go in, slide that forward. That should go in, and you'll notice that this kind of sticks out a little bit, which is fine. Again, that's kind of why the rear pivot pin is a little bit tougher to take out sometimes. All right, so next we're going to reinstall the handguard on here. Very simple. Just take it from the front of the weapon. I try not to bang it around as much as possible. You want to come on as straight of an angle as you can until you get to the end of these rails on these notches on both sides simultaneously. We're just going to continue to push it all the way to the rear. And then it should sit flush. There shouldn't be any gap here. And if there any gap that's right here should be minimal. There should not be, you should not be able to see through that. And that should lock all the way up. And just to confirm that you have done it correctly, if you look through the hole for the front takedown pin, you should just see a complete circle of light through there. There should not be any obstructions. So now we can go ahead and place the upper receiver on the lower receiver, line up those two pinholes. You can pop in the front or rear pin first. It really doesn't matter. Again, you may just have to apply some pressure to the rear to get it to actually lock into place. And then we're just going to do a function check to make sure we got this back together properly. Our weapon is on safe. Going to pull the trigger and nothing is happening. Remove the safety. It fires. We're going to charge it. Fires again. Charge it. Put it on safe. Nothing happens. So we have successfully reassembled this weapon. Again, just keep in mind, if you have replaced your barrel during the course of this process, just make sure to go back out and re-zero or just reconfirm your zero to make sure nothing shifted. So hopefully you found this video useful in your MPX disassembly and reassembly procedures. If there's anything that I did not answer or cover for you, please feel free to leave me a comment down below and let me know. If it's something that I cannot answer in a text response question, I will be glad to do a video or a short to help answer your question. So with that, thanks for your time, and we'll catch you in the next video.